Hello everyone, welcome back. Today we're going to do the classic AR-15 versus AR-10 video, okay? Now, this is a video that I think is something like 15 years in the making, okay? And back between 2008 and 2012, I interacted a lot and got training from a lot of combat veterans coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan. I used to run gun ranges back then. I was a range safety officer. Um, so one of the things I would ask them is, which gun is better, AR-10 or AR-15? At the time, I was new to the platform. Okay, so I was, interacting with them as a student, and I was really surprised, because I would get a lot of guys that were using, M4s, that would tell me that they sucked and they really wished they had 308 guns. And then I had lots of guys that were using M4s, right, with like 14.5-inch barrels, and they were saying they were too long and heavy. They wanted shorter guns in 223. And I heard a whole bunch of other opinions as well. So, you know, talking to combat veterans, I really didn't get a good sense that they were even sure what was the best gun. Um, even having been in combat, okay, more often than not, I found a lot of people wish they had something else other than what they had. Now, that just might be human nature, okay? Now, the other thing to consider is that they were in very specific circumstances. They were part of a larger unit, part of a larger military. So a lot of the information that they have may not even be relevant at all to our situation, okay? Because we're almost always going to be, alone or working with other civilians who might have a very wide variety of training. So we're not going to be part of a cohesive unit that has been training together for a long time, even if you're ex-military, okay? Once you're in the civilian world, you're cut off from that unit. You have to work with other civilians in your neighborhood, okay? If that's what it comes down to, okay? So, I've, here's the thing. For the last, 12, 15 years, I've primarily been using AR-15s. I only recently, about, I think, in the last 6 months, have I started working with an AR-10, okay? And I've kind of formed my own opinion, okay? And I'm in a position where I get to shoot these guns almost every day. I travel to different gun ranges. So I'm going to share my opinions on between these two guns, AR-15 versus AR-10. And this is a one gun, okay? You can only have one gun. Okay? You got to pick one gun because the obvious answer would be, well, I want to have an AR-15, for close quarters and inside 200 yards, and I want to have an AR-10 for distance shooting. Yes, that's kind of obvious, but assuming you can only have one gun for the situation because you can only carry one gun with one ammunition loadout on you if you're going to be traveling, if you're going to be going into the woods, so that's what we're working on here. Okay, you got to pick one gun. Which gun are you gonna pick? Okay. All right. So first of all, really sunny today. I had to use the whiteboard here because a lot of things I want to talk to you guys, and I was getting this crazy reflection from the sun off the whiteboard, and that's why I got these shades on today. Okay. So yeah, if I look a little weird to you guys or different, it's because of that. Because I needed to use the whiteboard, and I was getting the sun was reflecting off of that on me. Okay, so that's the backstory. Okay, having talked to lots of combat veterans about AR-10, AR-15, I got confusing answers, uncertainty, and it wasn't until I shot both of these or started working with both of these guns, because I had shot AR-10s before, but I had not done lots of shooting with them until fairly recently, and now I think I'm in a position to form my own opinion. Okay, so number one, common ammunition, common parts. Okay, obviously the AR-15 has the advantage there. Now with the AR-10, okay, there's going to be a lot of common AR-15 parts in here. Okay, because the trigger group is usually the same, and there might be some other parts, but there's lots of parts that are not common. And furthermore, pretty much, anybody out there that has an AR-15, regardless what company made the AR-15, the parts are going to be interchangeable. With the AR-10, they're really proprietary. You gotta, you can't just take an upper from one company, and one AR-10 upper from one company, and try to hot swap it with an AR-10 lower from a different company. They're not gonna fit together. The bolt may not fit in there. Charging handles might be different length. Okay, so that's the first problem that we're gonna run into with the AR-10. Parts compatibility. Okay, now before basically this discussion is limited to 5.56 versus 308. Okay, because I know we all know that, let's say for an AR-15 you can use like 300 blackout. For AR-10 you can have a 6.5 Creedmoor. Okay, and we're keeping it to 308 because, again, I'm looking for commonality here. There's lots of 5.56 out there. There's lots of 308 out there. There's not a whole lot of 6.5 Creedmoor, 6.5 Grendels, 6.8 whatever. 300 AAC. There's not that much out there. Okay, so we're looking for the commonality of parts and ammunition here. Okay, so for the purpose of this discussion, we're going to limit it to 5.56 versus 308. One of the things to be aware of with 6.5 Creedmoor, okay, it's generally considered a barrel burner. Okay, AR-10s shooting 308, we'll get up to somewhere. We'll go past 20,000 rounds. Okay, 6.5 Creedmoor, you're probably looking at about 6,000 rounds. And then your groups are going to start opening up. Okay. Now, competition shooters will give you much less numbers. They'll tell you a 6.5 Creedmoor is only good for like 2,000 rounds. However, they're looking for like quarter-inch groups. We don't need that. So that's why I'll say 6.5 Creedmoor probably good for 6,000 rounds versus 308 good for 20,000 plus rounds. So that's why I'm keeping this 5.56 versus 308 for this discussion. Okay. Down here at the bottom somewhere, we're going to talk about performance, and I've actually left that for last because I'm going to talk about what I think are the more important things. Okay, the three more important things are weight, recoil, and noise. Okay, so the thing with weight, okay, obviously with a lighter gun, you're going to be faster, more nimble. You can travel further distances. A lot of people say, get in shape, work out. Even if you're in the best shape, okay, you're still going to be faster, more nimble with a lighter gun. Okay, so even if you're in tip-top shape, your performance, your maneuverability is always going to be better with a lighter gun. Okay, now with the 308, okay, this is a heavy gun. We're talking like 12 to 13 pounds depending on what's up here, right? So this is like a 2.5 pound scope and mount. I could go lighter on this. I could shave a pound off of it, put an LPVO on it, get it down to about 12 pounds. But we're still dealing with a heavy gun. But with the 308, okay, so again, there's weight, recoil, and noise. So if I lighten the gun up too much, okay, what's going to happen is there's going to be more felt recoil. Okay, so having a heavy 308 actually aids you, okay, in dealing with the recoil. And the reason why the recoil is important is not because it's gonna hurt us or anything, right? We can handle the recoil. The issue is being able to keep your reticle or your dot on target and take follow-up shots and spot your impacts. Basically, staying on target, before, during, and after the shot, right? Being able to make that follow through and do the follow-up shot. So that's why recoil is an important issue with the 5.56. it's not an issue. You don't need a muzzle brake on this. You know, you can shoot 5.56, no problem with keeping your reticle on target. Now, with the recoil, okay, there's ways to deal with the recoil, like putting a muzzle brake on your 308. But the problem with the muzzle brake is that it's not just loud, okay? Loud is really the worst, the wrong word. It is concussive, okay? If you shoot lots of 308 rounds with a muzzle brake, you're gonna start getting a headache, okay? Because it's not just a matter of putting on earmuffs and doubling up on earmuffs. The noise from a muzzle brake, right? It's a concussive wave that actually like goes through your whole body, okay? So it is concussive, and if you're shooting it all day, all right, for several days, it's gonna beat you up. It's gonna start taking a toll. You're gonna find yourself with a headache. Most people, when they shoot 308s, they don't shoot hundreds of rounds, okay? You know, they shoot one or two, maybe three 20-round boxes. Most people are not shooting hundreds of rounds of 308. So that's going to get into the training issue that we're going to talk about later. Okay, but if you're shooting hundreds of rounds, or if you take a class where you're shooting thousands, like 1,000 or 2,000 rounds, that concussive noise, if you're using a muzzle brake, is going to start taking a toll. Now, one option is to, you got your muzzle brake, and then you get a suppressor that goes over the muzzle brake, and now you're getting into more weight, and you're getting into more weight at the far end of the gun, which is now longer, less maneuverable, less manageable. So the noise / the concussive management of the 308 quickly becomes an issue. Okay, so these are the three things that you have to balance. You got to balance the weight of the gun, right? You got to balance the recoil, and you got to balance the noise somehow. Okay, the gun has to be light enough and nimble enough to move around with, but on a 308, if it's too light, it's going to start beating you up too much. Okay, you generally you're going to shoot a heavier 308 better if you're, once you get into a stable position. Okay, okay, so we got, we got weight we got to manage, recoil for those follow-up shots, and the noise. Somehow we got to deal with the noise. And it seems like as we try to fix one, we ruin something else, right? So if we try to deal with the noise by putting, let's say, a suppressor on it, now we got more weight, the balance is off. If you try to, if you try to make the gun lighter, again, you got more weight. So these three things are like constantly fighting each other back and forth. So that's been my experience. Now, with regards to the concussion, okay, one of the things to consider is consider a flashbang grenade. Okay, the concept of a flashbang grenade, you throw it into a room, right? And yes, there's the flash, but there's also the bang, which basically disorients you. Okay, so the muzzle brake acts in a similar way, not to that extent, but if you understand how a flashbang grenade works with its, through the concussion, you'll start to understand why, having a muzzle brake and shooting, hundreds of rounds through it is going to start taking its toll on you. Okay? So next, let's get into the training. Okay, so with training, there's an issue of the quantity of training. Okay, so with AR-15s, I typically order 1,000 rounds at a time, right? I've never ordered less than 1,000 rounds of 5.56 ammo. I always get 1,000 rounds of AR ammo, and at times I've ordered 4,000 rounds in one order. Okay, so with 5.56, we're typically ordering 1,000 rounds at a time, and it is, there's many, if you take a typical one-day class, they're gonna tell you to bring 1,000 rounds. Okay, if you take a two-day class, they'll tell you to bring 2,000 rounds. Which on an AR-15, not a big deal. That's certainly doable, spread out throughout the course of the day. If you try to do that with 308, it's going to take a toll on you. It's going to beat you up. And what tends to happen is people don't do it. Okay, so with that. So for example, here I've got this AR-15, and I have on several occasions have fired 6 magazines, you know, back to back. And not doing like a mag dump, right, where I'm just trying to unload the magazines, but just in a training scenario, you know, pop, 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 you know, going, moving through, just shoot within, let's say 3 minutes or 5 minutes, having shot 6 magazines back to back. Okay, so with the AR-15, you can do that. You're gonna do it because the ammunition is cheaper, and you know that you've got a reliable gun that will work when the gun is hot. Okay, and that's important. Okay, the gun's got to be able to work when it's hot. With the AR-10, okay, I've been working with this now for about 6 months. The most I have done is basically mag dump one 20-round magazine. Okay, that's the most I have done with this. I'm usually a lot more conservative with the 308 ammunition because it's more expensive. So it's just like the most I've done is, and I've done it on more than one occasion, I've dumped one 20-round magazine, then on another day another 20-round magazine, you know, but I've never done like 6 magazines back to back, which means that I've never really heated up this gun. And this does have an adjustable gas system, which I love on this Palmetto, and it works great. But the question becomes, if I really get the gun hot, how's the adjustable gas block going to work? I mean, I don't know. I mean, I just haven't done it. That's not the way I use this gun. I primarily use this as a sniper / DMR type of gun, okay? Where I'm looking for, you know, long distance precision shots, okay? That tends to be how I use that gun. So I mean, it's just the way I train with that gun. And a lot of it is, I mean, why do I train with that gun like that? Part of it's economics. 308, a lot more expensive. But the other thing is it's a heavier gun, right? So just holding the gun, going through the exercises is tiring as hell. You know, and number 3, the gun beats you up. Okay, even without a muzzle brake, and that's why I do not have a muzzle brake on this. I just have a standard bird cage because I don't like the concussion. I don't want to, you know, try to make this longer with a suppressor. What I do with this is I just tune. I got the adjustable gas valve set like to the lowest setting that will work with each different type of ammunition that I'm using, and that's what I work it with. Okay. Yeah, I mean, so there's a question of how you train with the gun. So in order for a gun to be a good general purpose gun, right, you have to have done a training session where you're going through, if not 1,000 rounds a day, at least 500 rounds in a day. Okay. You have to go through that. Okay, you gotta ideally go through a class where you do 1,000 rounds or 2,000 rounds over a weekend. That's ideal. I think you gotta do that 6 magazine test. Again, not just dumping the rounds into like a pile of dirt, but just going through the exercises of, you know, and just shooting it at a steady rate. The gun will heat up enough so that you can get a sense of how reliable it's gonna be. Okay, and then you have to have a stockpile. Okay. Of 6,000 rounds. Okay, so if this is AR-15 versus AR-10, one gun. You only get to pick one gun here. Okay, if you're only going to have one gun, okay, you gotta have 6,000 rounds. Now in the past I've said 4,000 rounds, which is a good starting point, right? But I think that, you know, you want to get a little bit past the bare minimum of 4,000 rounds, because in the past I've said, well, you need 2,000 rounds for reserve and 2,000 rounds to train with. You know, so that's 4,000 rounds, but to me that's like bare minimal. So ideally you want to have at least 6,000 rounds, which is very doable with 5.56, especially again steel case ammunition, because, you know, it doesn't. I mean, you want to have some distance shooting ammunition. You want to have some 77 grains, but you can also have some steel case, right? You can have some cheaper ammunition, which is naturally going to happen. Okay? You're going to have it. Now with the 308, you know, can you have 6,000 rounds of 308? Okay, you know, I mean, I'm up to I was up to like 2,000. I've used up I think at least 500 rounds, so I'm down to like 1,500 now. But yeah, I mean, it's hard to build up a stockpile of 308, and some of that 308 includes Tula steel case 308. Okay, so yeah, getting up there to 6,000 rounds for that one gun, it is hard to do with 308. All right, so that's something that you got to consider. Okay? So the next thing, it's not just a question of you being able to shoot the gun. You know, your wife, kids, neighbor, newbies in an SHTF situation have to be able to pick up your AR-15 or your AR-10 if that's what you're using and shoot it. Okay, so my wife has shot the AR-10. You know, she liked it. Okay. She will not like the she has shot and liked the AR-15. She will not like the AR-10. First of all, she's not going to even like holding this thing up to shoot it. I mean, I would basically have to have her in a, you know, either in a prone or a benched position, and as soon as this thing goes boom, makes that loud sound and gives her that recoil, I just know she's not going to like it. Okay, so with wife, kids, neighbors, newbies, AR-15 all day. I mean, this is the gun that's gonna be the easiest for them to learn. I basically make a living training newbies, okay? You know, AR-15s, absolutely. Now, how about AR-9s? AR-9s are great training guns. So here's the thing, you can train some, because especially nowadays, training somebody with 9mm is cheaper than training them with 5.56. So what I'll typically do is I'll do 80% of the training with AR-9 and then switch over to an AR-15 with 5.56 for the end of the training session. And when they make that transition from AR-9 to AR-15, it's not a big deal. They can barely tell the difference in the recoil. The only difference that people notice is there's no last round bolt hold open with an AR-9, which is, you know, just the only issue with training people on an AR-9. It doesn't lock open on the last round, so it just changes the reload operation a little bit. But I can't go from AR-9 to AR-10, right? I can't go from training somebody on cheaper 9mm to a 308. Okay, that's not that, you know, you can't make that easy transition. So there is an easy step up from AR-9, you know, from AR-9 to AR-15, right? From 9mm to 5.56. I don't have that easy step up to AR-10 with newbies, okay? And that's a really important thing that I think you got to consider. You got to be able to put your wife, kids, neighbors, and newbies on your main gun, okay? Because no, you might get injured, you might be sick, lots of things can happen, right? And I did a whole video on things that, you know, will surprise you during SHTF, and one of them is that people get sick at the worst times, okay? So now let's talk about performance. I kind of left this for last because I think that's like one of the things that people focus on, like, you know, what one does versus the other. On the performance side, right? AR-15, we're going to talk in terms of muzzle energy. 1,100 pounds at the muzzle, right, with a 16-inch barrel. 1,100 pounds to muzzle. At 500 yards, 340 foot-pounds. Basically, it's a 9mm, okay? At 500 yards, your AR-15 is hitting like a 9mm, okay? At 1,000 yards, okay, your AR-15 is shooting like a 22. It's got about 100 foot-pounds of energy. If you're using 77 grain bullets, it'll get there. It'll definitely get to 800 yards. You can get to 1,000 if you're now. How accurate it will be, because the wind tends to move it a lot. Your ability to spot impacts, to make corrections, is a whole other story. That's a lot more difficult with that 22 basically. But with an AR-15, if you're using 77 grain bullets, you can get to 1,000 yards, and when it gets there, it has the power of a 22 long rifle. Okay, so at 500 yards, you got your AR-15 is basically a 9mm. At 1,000 yards, your AR-15 is a 22 long rifle. Okay, so AR-10 now, at the muzzle, it's got about 2,500 foot-pounds of energy. So that's roughly a little bit more than twice the power of your AR-15, which can be very significant if you're trying to use it for anti-material, like to stop a vehicle or something. Okay, so that extra power might be useful. So at 500 yards, it's got about 1,000 foot-pounds of energy. So at 1,000 yards, your AR-10. Okay, hope I didn't screw up. We said AR-10 at the muzzle is 2,500 foot-pounds. At 500 yards, your AR-10, it has 1,000 foot-pounds of energy. So that's roughly what your AR-15 does. Okay, so at 500 yards, your AR-10 has the power of an AR-15 at the muzzle. Okay. Now at 1,000 yards, your AR-10 has 340 foot-pounds of energy. So at 1,000 yards, your AR-10 is basically a 9mm. Okay, so both of these will get out to 1,000 yards, with the right ammunition. The issue that I find is in being able to spot impacts, because when I was shooting 77 grains at, let's say, 800 yards, I was having trouble spotting impacts, which means I was having a hard time correcting, doing self-correcting. With the AR-10, okay, at 800 yards and 1,000 yards, on the right background, right, on a fairly basically on the dirt background where the bullets will splash, you can much easier see the impacts with the AR-10, okay, with the 308. Not so easy to see at 800 yards or even 700 yards with the AR-15. Now, if the background is grassy, okay, even with the AR-10, if it's a grassy area, right, something like the woods here, or just, even with an AR-10, it can be very hard to spot the impact. So that's important to be aware of that. Just because you've got an AR-10, okay, with shooting a 308, if it passed 700 yards, yes, the gun is capable. But if you're shooting into a background or into an area where you can't spot the impacts and make corrections, you're just doing suppression fire. You're not going to be able to hit the target if you can't make corrections. Okay? So this limitation can exist with either one, either with the AR-10 or the AR-15. Okay? If you can't spot the impacts, you can't make corrections, you can't hit your target. It's just that the AR-10 is a lot more forgiving. If it's a dirt surface with no grass, you'll be able to spot the impacts a lot easier with the AR-10. Okay. Now, as far as effect, okay, inside of 200 yards, okay, we need a kill basically. We need to stop the threat. We don't want to just wound. And the reason is because if somebody is wounded inside of 200 yards, their mindset is going to be that their best chance of survival is going to be to continue to attack forward and take your position, rather than turn around and retreat. Because inside of 200 yards, they're thinking that, hey, if they turn around and retreat, you're going to shoot them in the back, okay? So that's why inside 200 yards, there's a good chance that even if they're wounded, they're going to continue to press forward if they're able to. And that's why we need to we need a more incapacitating hit inside of 200 yards. At 300 yards plus, if somebody's wounded at 300 yards, what their mindset is going to be that, hey, my best chance of survival is to turn around and get out of here. So that's why my thinking is that past 300 yards, wounding is okay. Okay, inside of 200 yards, we need to stop the threat. We need to terminate them. Okay, so for that reason, I think the AR-15 can work in that capacity. It's a good, 300 to 500, 300 to 600 yard gun, because wounding somebody at that distance takes them out of the fight. Okay, so that's my thought on that. Obviously, with an AR-10, yes, we can wound them, and they can, basically the AR-10 is going to be as effective at 600 yards as the AR-15 is going to be at 200 yards. Okay? and the main issue, like I said, with shooting at distance is the ability to spot impacts, which will do better with a 308 in some circumstances, if the ground is right. If it's grassy, if it's wooded, you're not going to be able to see it. Okay, so my summary of all this, okay, the way that we train with AR-15s, okay, using higher round counts, doing a lot of magazine dumps, moving and shooting. This we trained with the AR-15 to be used as a general purpose rifle. Okay, that's how we generally train with it. With the AR-10, okay, those of us that have it, we generally train with this to be a sniping rifle. Okay, we're basically more conservative with the ammunition. We use this more as a precision rifle. We're not running around with it. Okay, we're more stationary with it. So aside from all these things, if you just look at the way that we train with the gun, because the way that you train with the gun is the way that you're going to want to use the gun. Okay, we generally use the AR-15 as a general purpose rifle. So for that reason, regardless of everything else that we said, because we train with it as a general purpose rifle, it's going to be a better general purpose rifle. Okay, with the AR-10, even if you have it, right, even if you love it, even if it's your favorite gun, you most likely train with it as a sniping rifle, with doing precision shots at distance, being conservative with the ammunition. So that's why it is going to be better in that role, because not because it's so much of the rifle's design and configuration, but that's because that's how you train with it. Okay, so that's my conclusion after having worked with the AR-10 now for about 6 months, and it's actually very different than my line of thinking. So, well, the conclusion was the same, but the way that I got there was very different, because prior to owning an AR-10, right, having shot it a few times, having shot over people's AR-10s, my line of thinking was more in terms of, okay, it's a heavier gun, how much ammunition do I have for an AR-10? But now, having worked with it for 6 months, my focus is more along the lines of, how do I train with each gun? Okay, what have I been training to do with each gun? So the gun that I have been training with as a general purpose rifle is going to be a better general purpose rifle. The gun that I have been training with as a sniping rifle, anti-material rifle, it's going to be better for that role. Okay, so those are my thoughts on that. Let me know what you guys think. Drop some comments below, and I'll talk to you soon.